Betrayal feud.
The day was coming near, the day I knew I couldn't avoid forever. Outside, tires hissed across wet pavement. A neon open sign flickered through the blinds. Inside, the only light came from my phone screen glowing against the darkness. Then it buzzed. One message. Unknown number. I stared at it longer than I should have. "This is Emily Carter. I think you should know what your father said today." Emily Carter, my brother Daniel's girlfriend. My chest tightened in a way no firefight ever managed. I leaned forward slowly, elbows on my knees, breathing steady out of habit. The same controlled breathing we practiced before night drops. The same breathing that kept panic from taking over when things went wrong. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was worse. I opened the message thread. A video file sat there waiting. Below it, another text appeared. "I didn't know you were actually gone. I thought he was exaggerating." My thumb hovered over the screen. A memory pushed its way forward. My father's voice, sharp and final. "Go live in the streets if you care so much about being independent." The words had followed me for a year. I pressed play. The camera shook slightly. Someone had recorded it at a family barbecue. I could hear plates clinking, people laughing, music playing low in the background. Then my father's voice cut through everything. Harsh, certain, dismissive. "Daniel's the one who stayed. Daniel's the one who matters. Michael ran off pretending to be some hero. Kid probably couldn't last a week on his own." Laughter followed. Not loud, but enough. Enough to confirm what I already knew. My name sounded strange coming from him, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Michael Carter, age 29, Staff Sergeant, United States Army. But to my father, I was just the son he'd thrown out. The screen went dark as the video ended. My apartment suddenly felt smaller, quieter. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like distant helicopter blades. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling with cracked paint lines running across it, like maps of places I'd never go again. A year ago, my father had opened the front door and pointed outside. No argument, no hesitation, just a choice. "Daniel needs the room. You're not doing anything with your life anyway." He didn't know I'd already signed the contract, didn't know I was leaving for selection, didn't know I'd passed, didn't know what I'd become. That part had stayed classified, not officially, but personally, because after that night, I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. My phone buzzed again. "Emily, I'm sorry. You deserved better." I typed a response, deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. There wasn't anything to say. Instead, I stood up and walked to the small kitchen counter. The metal sat there beside an unopened envelope stamped with the Department of Defense seal. Tomorrow was the ceremony. 1 year later. 1 year since sleeping in a borrowed car outside a recruitment office. 1 year since becoming someone my father never imagined or believed in. I picked up the metal again. Cold, solid, real. Unlike the version of me my family remembered.
Across the room, my duffel bag sat packed and ready, just like always, because leaving had become easier than staying. And tomorrow, whether my father knew it or not, the truth was going to exist in the world, in uniform, in record, in history, with or without him. I turned off the apartment light and sat back down in the dark, alone, but not lost. If you're listening to this story, subscribe to Betrayal Feud for more stories and comment where you're listening from. The first night after my father kicked me out, I slept in my car behind a closed grocery store in Tucson. The parking lot lights hummed overhead, flickering every few seconds, turning the inside of the Baleno's windshield into a pale mirror. I remember staring at my reflection and thinking how strange it was that a person could look completely normal, while their entire life collapsed in a single evening. At that time, I wasn't Staff Sergeant Michael Carter. I was just a 28-year-old son who had run out of explanations. The argument replayed in my head like a broken recording. "Daniel needs stability," my father had said, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. Daniel stood behind him, quiet but not disagreeing. "I need a place to stay until I figure things out," Daniel had added, his voice soft, practiced, the same tone he'd used since we were kids whenever he wanted something. My father didn't even look at me when he answered. "You're older, you'll manage." That was it. No discussion, no hesitation, a decision already made long before that day. Growing up, Daniel had always been the center of my father's world. Daniel was the careful one, the safe one, the one who stayed close to home. He worked part-time at a hardware store for years, never moving forward but never moving away either. My father called it loyalty. When I enlisted, my father called it running away. "You think the Army's gonna fix you?" he said the day I told him. "I'm not broken," I replied. He laughed. "Everyone who leaves is." That conversation stayed with me longer than any training drill, not because it hurt in the moment, but because part of me had always hoped he'd be wrong. The recruitment office smelled like cheap coffee and printer ink. Posters of soldiers in desert uniforms covered the walls, showing confident faces under bright skies that didn't reflect reality. Sergeant Collins sat across from me, flipping through paperwork. "You sure about this?" he asked without looking up. "Yes." "You got family support?" I hesitated. "Not really." He nodded like he'd heard that answer 1,000 times. "That's okay," he said. "Some of the best soldiers don't." That was the first time someone said something about me that sounded like belief. I signed the contract that afternoon. Infantry, 11B. No dramatic music, no movie moment, just a pen scratching across paper and a quiet shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of waiting to be accepted. Fort Benning in July felt like breathing through a wet blanket. Drill Sergeant Alvarez had a voice that could cut through concrete. "You think you're special?" he shouted on day one. "Out there, nobody cares about your story, only what you can carry and who you can protect." That sentence became my foundation. The Army didn't care about family dynamics or old disappointments. It cared about performance, reliability, endurance. And for the first time in my life, those were things I could control. I learned how to move quietly with 60 pounds of gear, how to stay awake for 36 hours, how to trust strangers faster than I trusted my own blood, how to become useful. Letters from home never came, but I stopped checking after week 4. Afghanistan didn't look like the news. It looked quieter, dustier, lonelier. Our unit specialized in reconnaissance support, long patrols, observation, gathering information that most people would never hear about. Not heroic, not cinematic, necessary. Specialist Aaron Brooks became my closest friend there. He talked constantly, filling the silence that stretched across mountains and desert roads. "Back home, my mom thinks I fix radios," he joked once. "Maybe that's easier for her," I said. "Yeah, people don't like imagining what we actually do." That sentence stuck with me because it described my father perfectly. He didn't hate me. He just preferred a version of me that didn't exist. It happened outside Mosul during a joint operation months later after I'd been selected for advanced reconnaissance training. We were moving through an abandoned compound when the second-floor balcony collapsed beneath me. The fall wasn't dramatic, just sudden. 8 feet. But I landed wrong. My knee twisted, my shoulder slammed into concrete. The pain came fast, sharp, undeniable. But the mission didn't stop. Sergeant Miller grabbed my vest and pulled me upright. "Are you walking?" he asked. "Yes." Not brave, not dramatic, just necessary. We completed the operation.
Only later in the field clinic did the medic confirm ligament damage. That permanent ache never left. Neither did Miller's quiet nod afterwards, the kind soldiers give when words aren't needed. Months later, Captain Reyes called me into his office. "Your name came up during the after-action review," he said, sliding a document across the desk. Commendation recommendation. I stared at it. Not proud, not emotional, just surprised. "You kept moving when you didn't have to. That's the job, sir." He smiled slightly. "Most people say that. Fewer actually do it." The Army recorded it, filed it, remembered it, and for a moment, I wondered what it would feel like if my father knew. That night, sitting on my bunk under dim barracks lighting, I opened my phone and stared at my father's contact name. Dad. The word felt unfamiliar. I typed a message. "Hey, things are going well. I got recognized for something at work." I read it 5 times, then pressed send.
3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Minutes passed. Finally, a reply came. "Daniel's car broke down again. Do you know anything about engines?" I stared at the screen. Not angry, not surprised, just empty. The drawer metaphor came back to me, something Sergeant Collins once said about family. "Some people keep you in a drawer in their mind," he'd explained. "They only open it when they need something." That was the moment I realized I lived in my father's drawer, and Daniel held the key. I locked my phone and lay back on the bunk, staring at the metal frame above me. The Army saw me clearly. My family never had. And for the first time, I stopped trying to bridge that distance. The ceremony invitation sat in my email inbox for 3 days before I opened it again. Not because it wasn't important, because I already knew who wouldn't care. The subject line read, "Army Commendation Medal Presentation, Attendance Confirmation Required." Official, simple, procedural. The Army didn't celebrate loudly, it documented. I sat at the small metal desk in the barracks, the same kind I'd used for months, and pressed my thumb against the edge of the keyboard. Outside, soldiers laughed in the hallway, boots thudding against tile floors. Life moving forward, always moving. My phone lay beside the laptop. The contact name Dad stared back at me. For a long time, I didn't touch it. Then, slowly, I picked it up. I called him. 3 rings. 4. Then his voice. "Yeah?" No greeting, no surprise. "Hey, Dad," I said. Silence for a second. "Oh, Michael." The way he said my name sounded like remembering a password he didn't use often. "What's up?" "I've got a ceremony next week. Army recognition. I thought maybe you'd want to come." A pause, then a sigh. Flights are expensive." "It's in Phoenix." Another pause. "I've got work," he said, "and Daniel needs the truck this week." Of course he did. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay. You doing all right out there?" he asked, in the same tone someone uses to ask about the weather. "Yes." "That's good." Then he added something that settled heavily in my chest. "You always were independent." Not pride, not regret, just justification. The call ended. No argument, no anger, just confirmation. Later that night, a text arrived from Daniel. "Dad said you're getting some award or something. Congrats, man." Or something. I typed back, "Thanks." 3 dots appeared. Then, "You still got that old toolbox? Mine's missing stuff." I put the phone down. That was the language my family spoke. Requests, deflections, minimization. Never curiosity, never questions, never acknowledgement. It wasn't cruelty, it was indifference polished into habit. The morning of the ceremony, I woke before sunrise. The barracks were quiet, the air cool, the sky just beginning to lighten beyond the window. I laid the dress uniform across the bed. Every movement felt slow and deliberate. Steam rose from the iron as it pressed across dark blue fabric, sharp lines forming, buttons polished, shoes shining enough to reflect my face. I moved carefully, not out of anxiety, but respect. Not for the medal, for the version of myself that had earned it without anyone watching. The hallway filled with footsteps as other soldiers prepared for their day. Specialist Brooks knocked lightly on the open door. "You ready, Carter?" "Yeah."
He looked at the empty chair in the room. "No family coming?" "No." He nodded once. No pity, no questions, just understanding. "All right," he said. "Let's go." The ceremony took place in a small auditorium on base. Fluorescent lights, rows of metal chairs, a podium with a unit insignia. No dramatic music, no applause beyond what protocol required. Captain Reyes read from a printed page. Staff Sergeant Michael Carter demonstrated exceptional dedication during reconnaissance operations. His voice sounded calm, steady, practiced. The words felt distant, like they belonged to a report, not a person. I stepped forward when my name was called, saluted, accepted the medal, shook hands. Photographs were taken by a public affairs officer. Routine, documented, real. Then it was over, just like that. Afterwards, soldiers gathered outside the building. Brooks clapped my shoulder. "Your dad's missing out," he said casually. "Maybe," I replied. But the truth was simpler. He wasn't missing anything in his world, because in his version of reality, I hadn't done anything worth seeing. Captain Reyes approached with a small nod. "Public Affairs recorded the ceremony," he said. "It'll be uploaded to the unit page later this week." "Thank you, sir." He hesitated before speaking again. "You did good work, Carter. Not emotional, not dramatic, but real. That mattered. More than I expected." That evening, I returned to my apartment. The same flickering neon light filtered through the blinds. The same quiet room. But something inside me had settled. Not healed, not fixed, just clear. I placed the medal on the kitchen counter and didn't look at it again. Because the ceremony hadn't changed anything outside that base. My father still believed Daniel was the dependable son. Daniel still believed I was the one who left. And for the first time, I accepted that their understanding of me might never evolve. The need to explain myself faded, not in anger, in exhaustion, then in peace. I sat down on the couch, leaning back into the cushions, listening to the hum of the refrigerator again. Steady, constant, like duty, like time. My phone remained silent. No messages, no calls, no acknowledgement. And strangely, that silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt honest. 3 days after the ceremony, I forgot about the video entirely. That's how the Army worked. Recognition happened, then work continued. No lingering, no replaying the moment. Just the next task, the next briefing, the next responsibility. I was in the motor pool that afternoon, sleeves rolled up, helping Brooks check equipment, when my phone began vibrating in my pocket. Once, then again, then continuously. I ignored it at first, but when Brooks glanced at me and said, "You might want to check that," I finally pulled it out. 8 missed calls, all from my father. A message appeared before I could process that. "Dad, call me." Another. "Dad, where are you?" Another. "Dad, why didn't you tell us?" I stared at the screen. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands didn't shake. That year had changed something fundamental inside me.